Well, welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Gato Roboto, which just came out for the Nintendo Switch. And if you've seen or heard anything about it, yes, it is an overly cutesy retro-styled Metroid-Vania, but along with its uniqueness and a couple of quirks, it definitely does really well to establish itself as its own unique game. The basic story is that an interstellar soldier had picked up a distress signal from a nearby planet, and after getting permission to investigate from his supervisors, his cute kitten Kiki jumps up on the control panel and causes their ship to go into an uncontrolled spiral, crashing into the planet's surface. And unfortunately, our would-be rescuer is now pinned into his own cockpit, leaving Kiki the only one available to go and investigate. And while having mechanical suits on hand in a research laboratory is pretty much par for the course, it does seem a little strange that they're a perfect fit for his kitten Kiki. And the further you make it into the game, that little mystery is subtly unveiled. But while the graphics will probably have most classic gamers in a retro nostalgia heaven and the comedic dialogue will definitely be entertaining, the gameplay itself is actually really solid. As you can expect from a Metroid-Vania style title, there's gonna be pretty simple platforming, but there are a few areas that do get pretty technical. Additionally, as soon as you do manage to don your first robotic mech armor, which pretty much controls just like you would expect from a typical Metroid title, you'll be granted an arm cannon with a fairly appreciable rate of fire, but a very limited range. But as Metroid and Metroid-Vania style games are built around the concept of exploring, you'll be granted access to permanent upgrades, which will eventually give you access to larger and larger portions of the map. Among these are a rocket launcher that allows you to crush destructible walls, as well as a spin jump, which is essentially a double jump, and a dash ability that can allow you to charge through obstacles and maybe even past enemy fire. But one mechanic that Gato Roboto brings to the table that other Metroidvania style titles really don't is that you'll not only have access to your upgradable mechanical armor, but in certain situations a submarine or even a gun turret. At any point in the game, you can confront different situations that'll require you to navigate the levels in different ways. And though your upgradable armor with its gun arm and its rocket launchers and double jumps is pretty OP, its major weakness besides its size is water. And that being the case, one of the staple mechanics in the game is for Kiki to actually exit her armor suit in order to navigate through small passageways or to be able to use things like submarines or gun turrets to manipulate the levels in very specific ways. As Kiki is just a small kitten though, when navigating without any sort of robotic upgrades, any touch from any enemy is pretty much an instant death. But regardless of whether you're crawling through tiny passageways as a tiny helpless kitten, or going full bore guns blazing in a mech suit, once your HP reaches 0, you'll be starting over at the nearest checkpoint. Thankfully though, checkpoints are spread fairly generously throughout the game and do come in a number of forms. Your typical checkpoint will have an old floppy diskette icon floating above it letting you know that it's a save point, and in addition to saving, it'll also refill all of your health. However, in addition to trying to find your way all the way to the end boss, there's a handful of collectibles and suit upgrades that you can find scattered throughout the game. And at any point that you do find an upgrade or a collectible known as a cartridge, this will also work as a save point. Cartridges though, while definitely a collectible in the game, do offer more than collectible value. Each cartridge that you find will grant you access to a new retro-style filter, and finding certain numbers of these cartridges can allow you access to new permanent weapon upgrades. And as mobs are definitely not a one-hit clear and bosses have massive HP bars, more power is more better. On the note of bosses though, this is where Gato Roboto might get more or less fun for certain players. The general difficulty level in Gato Roboto is a fair moderate average, but the difficulty of the bosses can peak a little bit. Given their extensive life bars and their broad complement of movements, if you're not a fan of engaging with bosses and memorizing movesets, some of these encounters might appear stifling. However, as previously mentioned, with checkpoints being spread generously throughout the game, you really don't have to backtrack too terribly far should you die in any given encounter. And while this definitely doesn't make any individual boss fight any easier, it does abate some frustration for some players who are still adapting to the learning curve. And on that note, probably one of the most impressive features about Gato Roboto being such a short game is that every new enemy type and every situation where you might be required to use a new ability is actually very delicately introduced. In multiple situations in the game, you'll encounter a locked room scenario where you're required to kill all enemies that you see. And while this definitely does not even close to reproduce the difficulty of a boss fight, what it does is show you each individual enemy's attack patterns in a very low stakes environment. And this is actually iconic of early games like Mega Man and the earliest Metroid titles themselves. But while all this actually points to a really amazing gaming experience, as I briefly mentioned earlier, Gato Roboto is actually a fairly short game. And even a player like myself who's not particularly gifted in high-level platformers beat it in about 4 hours. So whether you're trying to rush through and be the first to the finish, or you're trying to go at a 100% completion, it may take you between 3.5 to 5.5 hours. But even then, considering the uniqueness of the game and its entertainment value compared to its price, you really can't go wrong. The game's controls are actually surprisingly tight for such a budget title, and despite being completely monochromatic, its graphics and its audio are really on point. The game's maps are actually surprisingly large and well interconnected, but the development of the game and its scripting leads for very little backtracking. And additionally, the lighthearted comedic scenario for the entire game, as well as the dialogue between characters, brings a unique and refreshing air to this Metroid-Vania style genre. So in closing the review, I just have to say domo arigato, Gato Roboto, and yes Max, that was for you. So if you enjoyed the review or found it helpful, feel free to throw me a like or a comment to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There are new and unique indies coming out literally every single day, so there's always going to be some new game to find out about right here. But since I can only cover a few games a week, if you want to know which ones are coming out next, you can check the announcement tabs on our new Discord server, or you might just get lucky and I might throw in a hint or a vote for the next game to be covered on Twitter. But anyway, this has been Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.